The dim glow of the lamp cast long shadows in the senator's study, illuminating the rich mahogany desk where James Price sat, swirling a glass of bourbon across from him. Senator Price leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable as he studied his son between them. A recording device rested ominously on the desk, its blinking red light reflecting off the polished surface. "This is a problem," Senator Price said, his voice low but deliberate. "Dietrich Porte has enough credibility left to drag this out. If he decides to fight, it could complicate everything." James exhaled sharply, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Father, you worry too much. Dietrich's a has-been. No one takes him seriously anymore, and if they do," he gestured at the recorder, "we've got insurance." The senator's piercing eyes bore into James. "Insurance is only as good as the people using it. Are you sure you can handle this, James? You've always been ambitious, but ambition without control is chaos." James' smirk widened. "You taught me everything I know. Besides, this is just a minor obstacle. Once we release the recording, Dietrich won't have a leg to stand on." The senator picked up the recorder, his thumb brushing over the play button. A brief static crackled before the unmistakable voice of Dietrich Porte echoed in the room. "I trusted you, James. You said this was a sure thing. Now I'm looking at losses I can't explain to my investors." The voice paused, followed by James' own reply, smooth and calculated. "Dietrich, these things take time, you know that. Besides, your name adds weight to the operation. People trust you. You're the respected investor, after all." Senator Price stopped the recording and set the device down. "It's damning," he admitted, his tone thoughtful. "But it's not enough. People will ask questions. We need to control the narrative before Dietrich even knows what hit him." James raised an eyebrow. "Control the narrative? You mean spin it?" The senator's lips curved into a sly smile. "It's not spin if it's the truth, James. After all, facts can be interpreted." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I'll have Alex reach out. She knows how to work the machines." James' brow furrowed. "Machines? What machines?" Senator Price chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the room. "Don't worry about it. Alex will sit with you and explain. When we're done, there won't be a single corner of the media untouched. Every opinion, every comment will reinforce what we want the world to believe. It will look organic, grassroots, as if ordinary people are calling for Dietrich's downfall." James leaned back, intrigued, astroturfing, huh? Clever. The senator stood, towering over his son. "This isn't a game, James. One misstep, and this all comes crashing down. Do you understand?" James met his father's gaze, the smirk gone, replaced by steely determination. "I understand perfectly." Later that night, James poured himself another drink, his mind racing. The recording was a weapon, yes, but his father's plan to manipulate public opinion was brilliant. Alex, the senative's trusted operative, was a master at shaping narratives. She'd been instrumental in smoothing over more than one scandal in the past. His phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Alex, "Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Be ready." James set the phone down, his confidence returning. He could already see the headlines. Dietrich Porte, fraud or failure. The public would turn against Dietrich, his investors would scatter, and James would emerge unscathed, his power solidified. But deep down, in a corner of his mind he rarely acknowledged, a flicker of doubt lingered. Dietrich wasn't just any opponent. He was shrewd, resourceful, and above all, desperate. And desperate men were dangerous. James extinguished the thought as quickly as it came. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. The serpent had set its trap, and all that was left was to wait for its prey to step into it. As he downed the last of his bourbon, James smiled to himself. The game was just beginning.
The private lounge at the summit was dimly lit. A sanctuary for the city's elite, Alex, dressed impeccably in a sharp black suit, sipped her martini while studying James Price. He was leaned back in his chair, exuding the confidence of someone who'd never truly faced consequences. His sharp eyes glinted with the dangerous mix of privilege and cunning. "All right, James," Alex began, her voice smooth and calculating. "Tell me why I'm here. What's the angle?" James swirled the amber liquid in his tumbler, the ice clinking softly. "Dietrich's hanging by a thread, but that thread is Rachel Woods. If we can isolate her, he'll crumble." And then he smiled, his teeth gleaming like a predator. "The spotlight shifts. No one's looking at me." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Rachel, you think you can go after her directly? With her backing, Dietrich is more than formidable. She's smart, connected, and fiercely loyal." James leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Her world is tied to her family's legacy, Elise's lab, and that damn foundation. If we pull the funding for her cancer research, she'll have no choice but to reassess her priorities." Alex tapped her nails on her glass thoughtfully. "And you think cutting her funding will make her turn on Dietrich?" "No," James admitted, his smirk returning. "But it'll divide her attention, force her to make tough choices. If we're lucky, it'll force her hand to sever ties with him altogether." Alex tilted her head, a flicker of admiration in her cold eyes. "Okay, that could work. I'll put out some feelers. The financiers she's relying on for the lab's fundraiser. Let's see if they can be encouraged to reconsider their commitments." "Good." James' voice was a purr. "But let's not make it obvious. No one pulls out all at once. It's a trickle, slow enough that she doesn't suspect until it's too late." Alex leaned back, crossing her legs as she studied him. "And what about Dietrich's bankers? You know he's been walking on eggshells trying to keep them from pulling the plug." James's laugh was low and serpentine. "He's barely keeping his head above water. His family office is a facade. They can't meet withdrawals. Right now, they're leveraged to the hilt. And if the market even hiccups, he'll be $5 billion in the red." Alex's eyes narrowed, curious. "How do you know this? You seem disturbingly calm for a man who's facing his own firestorm." James picked up his glass, savoring the bourbon as though it held all the answers. "Jonah," he said simply. "He got drunk one night, spilling his disillusionment at the bar. I encouraged him to jump ship, of course. And before he did, he shared some useful insights." Alex's lips curled into a faint smile.
"You're a viper, James, you know that?" James leaned closer, his tone laced with arrogance. "Her family's legacy is under threat, and I'm the only one who can preserve it." Alex arched a brow. "Manipulation? Such a harsh word. I prefer strategy." Before Alex could reply, her sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement in the corner of the lounge. A man, inconspicuously dressed in a dark jacket, sat alone with a newspaper and a half-empty drink. He was hunched over, but his head tilted slightly in their direction. Something about his posture set off alarm bells. "James," Alex said under her breath, her smile unwavering as she nodded toward the man. "We might have an uninvited guest." James followed her gaze, his smile never faltering. "Noah," he muttered, recognition dawning, Dietrich's shadow, always lingering where he shouldn't be. Alex smirked, her voice a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" James's eyes narrowed as he drained the last of his bourbon. "Nothing. Let him listen. Let him think he's stumbled on something. We'll make sure he hears exactly what we want." Alex's gaze sharpened. "You're playing a dangerous game, James." He smirked. "What's the fun if there's no risk?" As they returned to their hushed conversation, Noah's hand tightened around his glass, his mind racing. He'd heard enough to know the stakes had just escalated. "Nu, she was calm. Smartest taste. No bowed and foined of her last. Hubble is calm." She beweist that in she's come, and sad as a fool of her timing will come to ways. She was like Sean was survive with cravies, on the force calm that here was maze. She said, I, the like how gone for me of bird. She said, "E'er with her come in the store, as the liest prash was a storm." She said, and she fenced it, and she self far away. She was not the bird where asked me. And she come, and proclaim in the water's breast, then she quies a self that I knowed is all so free. The luckiest pad, for Westminster smoft and shugged, pronouncy of her old ways. Yeah, shit is come. Jessie's phone buzzed. The name Rose lighting up the screen. She picked up immediately, her voice filled with curiosity. Rose, long time. What's going on? On the other end of the line, Rose, a veteran crime journalist with a knack for uncovering high-profile scandals, sounded unusually hesitant. Jessie, something's come across my desk, and it concerns Elise. I know you two are close, which is why I wanted to give you a heads up. Jessie's stomach tightened. Elise, why would she come up on the crime beat? She's working on cancer research, for God's sake. Rose's voice lowered, a mix of concern and wariness. Well, this news with Dietrich Porte and James Price has everyone buzzing, and Rachel Wood's name keeps surfacing as an investor. It's creating ripples in all the wrong circles. Jessie's fingers flew over her keyboard, pulling up emails and documents on her laptop. The recording Noah had sent her, showing James Price meeting with Alex, was still fresh in her. Who gave you the tip? Jessie asked, her tone sharpening. Rose sighed. Not sure it's a tip anymore. It's more like a secret that everyone knows. The chatter's growing louder, and it's not flattering. Jessie's voice turned icy. Rose, just give me a name. Rose hesitated. It's coming from multiple directions, but what's worrying is the coordinated nature of it. This isn't organic, Jessie. It's engineered. Jessie's mind raced. Engineered how? Rose leaned in. The kind of stuff designed to go viral, to influence public opinion. It's like a pile on waiting to happen. And Elise, Rachel, and even Dietrich are in the crosshairs. Whoever's behind it knows how to hit where it hurts. Reputation, credibility, everything. Jessie's blood ran cold. And James Price, what's his angle in all this? Rose's laugh was bitter. He's squeaky clean, at least on paper. There's a PR machine at work here, Jessie. Every negative story about him is buried, every positive one amplified. Meanwhile, Rachel, Elise, and Dietrich are getting battered. Whoever's running this knows exactly how to weaponize the narrative. Jessie gripped the phone tighter. Rose, keep digging. And if you find a name, you call me first. In his dimly lit townhouse, Dietrich flipped through the documents. Rachel had sent him, each page a fresh stab to his gut. The evidence was overwhelming. James Price hadn't just siphoned funds. He'd implicated Dietrich in fraudulent activities, creating a web of deceit so intricate that untangling it seemed impossible. His phone buzzed, Rachel's name flashed. On the screen, Rachel, Dietrich answered, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I just came from Noah," Rachel said, her voice tight. "He knows we're onto him." "That makes two of us," Dietrich muttered. He rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "The man's a viper, but what do we do about it?" Rachel hesitated, her tone softening. "Noah believes Alex is running a spin machine. She's going to hit us hard. Our networks, our reputations, everything we've worked for." Dietrich exhaled sharply, his shoulders slumping. "When is the article going out?" Rachel's pause was telling soon, but it's not just one article. This is bigger than a single story. Millions of people, reporters, influencers, the public, are about to consume a coordinated campaign of lies, and they won't even know it's being funded by Senator Price. Dietrich's jaw tightened. Astroturfing, crisis PR, digital retaliation. He's playing dirty. And if he succeeds, we're done. "We won't let him," Rachel said firmly, "but we need to act now. Noah's given us the first crack in their armor. If we can prove this campaign is manufactured, we can expose James and Senator Price for what they are." Dietrich's gaze hardened, resolve replacing his weariness. "Then we fight, whatever it takes." Rachel sat hunched over her desk, her laptop illuminating the darkened room. Alan, her trusted confidant and forensic accountant, leaned over her shoulder, his glasses catching the faint glow of the screen. "Here," Rachel said, pointing to a series of transactions buried within a spreadsheet. Dietrich had sent her a look at this. The amounts shift through multiple shell companies, all routed offshore, but this one is different. Alan squinted, adjusting his glasses. "Sunstone Financial Consultancy," he read aloud. "Never heard of it. Let me check something." Rachel watched as Alan pulled up a secure database on his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his face taut with concentration. A few moments later, he sat back, his expression grim. "Sunstone isn't just obscure, it's opaque." Alan said it's tied to a handful of ultra-wealthy clients, including political figures. "And look at this." He turned the screen toward Rachel. "James Price's family trust is a majority stakeholder." Rachel's blood ran cold. "You're saying this consultancy is a front?" Alan nodded. "Not just a front, it's a linchpin. They're laundering funds through this entity, hiding the trail from regulators. It connects James Price directly to these fraudulent investments and drags Dietrich down with it." Rachel's chest tightened. Dietrich trusted James. He didn't see this coming. Alan looked at her, his tone cautious. "Rachel, this implicates everyone. If we go public with this, you'll be dragged into it too. Your name is on some of these transactions as an investor." Rachel's jaw clenched. "I don't care. If we don't stop James now, he'll destroy everything." Alan leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "Then, we need more. A single document won't bring him down. We need to follow this trail further. Find something indisputable." Rachel nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then let's get to work." Hours later, Rachel was deep into the documents when her phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Unknown, she hesitated before answering. "Rachel Woods," she said cautiously. A cold, clipped voice responded. "Miss Woods, this is Agent Lee with the Financial Crimes Unit. We've just taken Dietrich Porte into custody on charges of fraud and embezzlement." Rachel's breath hitched. "What? That's impossible. The evidence against him is compelling." Harper continued. "We'll be holding him without bail. I suggest you get a lawyer if you're connected to any of his dealings." The line went dead. Rachel sat frozen, her mind racing. Dietrich's arrest wasn't just a blow. It was a calculated move. James was tightening the noose. In the sterile confines of a holding cell, Dietrich sat on the edge of a metal cot, his head in his hands. The clang of a door echoed as a guard approached. "You've got a visitor," the guard said gruffly. Dietrich looked up, hope flickering in his eyes, but it wasn't Rachel. It was Alex, her lips curled in a venomous smirk. "Hello, Dietrich," Alex said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "You look cornered." Dietrich stood, his fists clenched. "What do you want?" Alex stepped closer, her voice low. "Just a friendly reminder, stay quiet, and maybe this will blow over. But if you start pointing fingers, well, let's just say Rachel's family has a lot to lose." Dietrich's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Alex smiled and turned to leave.
If we can expose Sunstone's connection to James, we might still have a chance. Rachel took a deep breath, her hands trembling, but her resolve unshaken. "Then let's do it for Dietrich, for my family." As they dove back into their work, the weight of their task pressed down on them. The stakes had never been higher, and the enemy was relentless. But Rachel knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't stop until James Price was exposed for what he truly was.
Jesse's phone buzzed again, interrupting the tense silence that had settled between her and Rachel. The cryptic message on the screen read, "Recent events have made it difficult to trace. We are unable to reach the team via regular channels. Find Kipon Stevens urgent." Jessie exhaled sharply and passed the phone to Rachel. "This guy," she said, pointing at the photo attached to the message, "looks like the living embodiment of male arrogance." Rachel's heart clenched as her eyes landed on the image. The man staring back at her from the screen had a sharp, angular face and cold, calculating eyes. His presence seemed to radiate self-assurance that teetered into smugness. "Yes," Rachel said quietly, her voice tight. "That's Kip." Jessie leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, studying Rachel's reaction. "I've heard some chatter. David says he's running a small operation with Kip officially. It's minor stuff. Background analytics or something. But unofficially, the whispers are that he's either planning to take over James Price's fund or launch one of his own." Rachel's grip on the phone tightened. "What?" she hissed. "That jackass? No way he could run anything legitimate." The encrypted files Alan had been decrypting earlier that day glowed on the screen. Their contents, an intricate web of transactions, falsified ledgers, and hidden accounts. Capon's name was stamped on several of them here. Alan said, highlighting a particularly convoluted flow of funds. "This one links directly to Sunstone Financial. But look at the signature, Capon Stevens. If anyone knows the depths of James Price's fraud, it's him." Rachel frowned, her mind whirling. He's not a whistleblower by nature. If he's releasing anything, it's for leverage. And if he's still working with David, he's trying to position himself to take over, or to shield himself, Alan added. "Think about it. If the fund collapses, everyone else gets burned, but Kip walks away clean." A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Noah stood there, his face pale. "Rachel, we've got a problem." Capon Stevens was dead. The news hit like a thunderclap. Noah dropped the phone on Rachel's desk, the screen displaying a breaking news alert. CFO of prominent financial firm found dead in apparent accident. "Apparent my ass," Noah muttered, pacing the room. "This reeks of foul play. And those encrypted files, they're probably the reason." Rachel felt a chill crawl down her spine. Was he the one feeding David the files? Most likely, Noah said, and now he's gone. Someone wanted to silence him. Alan clicked through the files on his laptop, his brow furrowing. The cash Kip sent. There's more here than what we initially thought. If Kip was killed for this, then we're sitting on a powder keg. Rachel's mind raced. This can't just be about Dietrich anymore. This is about protecting an empire. James Price will stop at nothing to keep his name clean. And if they find out we have these documents? Alan asked, his voice low. Rachel stared at the glowing screen, her heart pounding. Then we need to make sure they don't. That evening, Rachel sat alone in her office staring at the encrypted files. She knew that the next move had to be calculated. Capon's death wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. James Price wasn't just trying to maintain control. He was erasing anyone who could expose him. Rachel picked up her phone and dialed Noah. We need to meet, she said. Tonight. The game was shifting, and Rachel knew she had to act before it was too late. The weights and signs. Insidious. The buzz of activity in Rachel's office had a frantic energy. Phones rang incessantly. The steady hum of printers filled the air, and whispers rippled like an undercurrent. Outside, a throng of reporters swarmed the entrance, their cameras flashing incessantly as the FBI agents stepped into the building. The scene was chaotic, and Rachel's carefully curated privacy now lay in shambles. Rachel sat at her desk, her hand gripping a steaming cup of coffee as Claire knocked lightly on the door. The feds are here, Claire said, her voice tight. Everything looks intact. What should we do? Rachel leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Hand it over to Noah, she replied after a moment's pause. Her tone was steady, but Claire could sense the weight behind her words. Noah was already in the conference room when the FBI agents entered, their demeanor authoritative but measured. A tall agent in a dark suit stepped forward, holding out a folder. Good morning, the agent began. We're from the FBI, here to request some files related to an ongoing investigation. Rachel's attorney, who had been reviewing the subpoena, stepped forward. Do you have a court order? He asked, his voice even. The agent handed over the folder. Yes, we do. The attorney scrutinized the documents for a moment before nodding. Everything appears to be in order. I'll have my assistant make copies for you. The agents exchanged glances, their faces impassive. Noah stood at the far end of the room, his expression calm as he observed the interaction. Once the files were handed over, the lead agent turned to Noah. We're gonna need your cooperation. Of course, Noah said, his tone professional. What kind of information are you looking for? Details on potential suspects, evidence, anything related to the case. The agent replied. Noah gestured to the stack of documents on the table. You'll find everything we've compiled so far. If there's anything missing, let me know. As the agents began flipping through the documents, the tension in the room was palpable. Rachel watched from her office window, her stomach knotting with unease. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elise. What is this? Attached was a link to a news report showing the FBI entering the building. Rachel cursed under her breath and typed a quick reply. Damage control. I'll call you later. Back in the conference room, the lead agent stopped at a particular page, his brow furrowing. He looked up at Noah. What is this? He asked, pointing to the document. Noah leaned in, his expression neutral. That's a breakdown of the fund's cash flow from the last quarter. There are discrepancies, the agent said, his tone sharp. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Discrepancies. Those numbers match what's been reported. The agent's gaze hardened. We have reason to believe you're withholding information. We know you've had contact with certain individuals involved in this case. I've been upfront and honest with you at all times. Noah countered, his voice firm. If you have evidence suggesting otherwise, produce it. The agent leaned closer, his voice low. We want the truth. What information are you withholding? I am not withholding anything, Noah said, his tone steady despite the mounting pressure. The tension in the room was almost suffocating, but Noah stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. The agents exchanged a look before returning to the documents. Rachel's phone rang again, this time from her lawyer. Rachel, he said, his voice clipped.
You need to distance yourself from this immediately.
I'm not abandoning Dietrich, Rachel replied, her voice laced with resolve. What about your family's legacy? Her lawyer shot back. If you get dragged into this, it's not just your reputation on the line, it's everything. Rachel paused, the weight of his words sinking in, but her resolve didn't falter. I'll clear Dietrich's name, she said firmly, no matter the cost. As the FBI agents exited the building, the reporters surged forward, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward. Rachel watched from her office window, her hands clenched into fist. She knew the road ahead was treacherous, but she wasn't about to back down. The clock was ticking, and Rachel was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The sun filtered through the large bay windows of the Woods family kitchen. But the light did little to lift the gloom hanging over breakfast. Elise sat at the table, staring at her untouched coffee across from her. Rachel scrolled through her phone, the tension between them thick as molasses. Elise. Rachel began cautiously, lowering her phone. Are you going to eat? Elise looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. No, she said shortly. I just lost another donor this morning. Paul pulled out. Rachel froze, her mug halfway to her lips. Paul? He was covering a huge portion of the lab costs. 20%. Elise confirmed, her voice tight. It's devastating, Rachel. Between the bad press and these FBI visits, people don't want to be associated with us, with me. Rachel leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concern. This isn't you. It's Dietrich, and James Paul knows that. Elise shook her head. It doesn't matter. The lab's tied to my name, and my name's tied to you and Dietrich. That's all they see. Elise's office. Later that day, Elise sat in her office, staring blankly at her computer screen. The numbers didn't lie. Even with the most optimistic projections, they were running out of time. Jonathan Woods entered, a folder in hand. Elise, he said gently, placing the folder on her desk. I've started reaching out to other programs to place your grad students. If this falls through, they need options. Elise's chest tightened. I promised them, she whispered, her voice breaking. I made them believe in this. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder. You gave them hope. That's more than most people ever do. I need to fix this, Elise said, standing abruptly. James Price's penthouse. Meanwhile, James Price paced his luxurious penthouse suite, the tension etched into his normally confident features. The viral video of his indiscretions had sparked a wildfire of controversy, and the fallout was beginning to threaten his empire. Dad, James said, his voice clipped as he paced, phone pressed to his ear. I need your help. On the other end, Senator Price's voice was cold. Do you have any idea what you've done? This family's reputation is hanging by a thread because of your recklessness. James gritted his teeth. This isn't just about me. The firm is collapsing, and the FBI is closing in. If they get Dietrich to talk, Senator Price interrupted sharply, then make sure he doesn't use the connections you have left to control the narrative. Dad, the connections are dwindling. The press is turning on me. I need more than advice. I need action. There was a long pause. I'll see what... Rachel under siege. Rachel's phone buzzed with a news alert. She hesitated before opening it, her stomach sinking as she read the headline, Rachel Wood, silent partner or silent accomplice. Her pulse quickened as she skimmed the article. It insinuated that her ties to Dietrich made her complicit in the financial scandal and hinted at troubling questions surrounding Elise's lab funding. The smear campaign had begun. She tossed her phone onto the couch and ran her hands through her hair. "They're coming for us," she muttered. Rachel and Elise confront the fallout. That evening, Rachel sat beside Elise on the couch, the tension palpable. "Elise," Rachel began softly, "I saw the article." Elise laughed bitterly. "Which one? The one questioning my credentials or the one implying I'm laundering money for Dietrich?" Rachel reached for Elise's hand. "We'll fight this together." "How, Rachel?" Elise snapped. "With your public reputation in tatters, with my lab hanging by a thread, people are running for the hills, and all because of your connection to Dietrich." Rachel pulled back, her face pale. "I didn't ask for this, and neither did I." Elise stood, her hands clenched. "But we're in it now. I need you to fix this, Rachel. Not for Dietrich, for us." Senator Price plays puppet master. Senator Price sat in his dimly lit office, reviewing the latest reports from his team. The campaign against Rachel and Elise was working. Donors were fleeing, public opinion was shifting, and the media was eating it up. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Alex entered, her expression smug. "The latest pieces are live. We've tied Rachel to Dietrich and thrown in some doubt about Elise's lab. The backlash is building." The senator leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Good, keep the pressure on. If Rachel falls, Dietrich has no anchor." "And James?" Alex asked. Senator Price's expression darkened. "He's my son." Rachel's determination. Late that night, Rachel sat alone in her office, poring over the documents Dietrich had left her. She traced the connections, following the money trail. Her phone buzzed. It was Jesse. "I've got something," Jesse said without preamble. "A lead from James Price's CFO, Capon Stevens." Rachel straightened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "What is it?" "A cache of encrypted documents that he gave David," Jesse said. "You have to meet with David, team captain, to get it, but it might be enough to clear your name and expose Price." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Set it up. If they're going to play dirty, so will we." The humid night air pressed against Rachel as she walked down the quiet street, her pulse quickening with every step. She knew the risk she was taking, but desperation trumped caution. Her search for David, a shadowy figure who had once been a trusted confidant in murky financial circles, was her last card to play. The sound of a tin can clattering in an alleyway brought her to an abrupt halt. Rachel peered into the darkness, her heart racing. A figure emerged. A tall, athletic man whose sharp eyes gleamed under the dim streetlight. "Are you looking for David?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate. Rachel nodded, her throat dry. She thought of running, but instead mustered her courage. "Yes." "Follow me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The ride. The man led Rachel to the end of the block where a sleek black G-Wagon idled, its windows tinted. Impossibly dark, he rapped on the window, exchanged a nod with someone inside, and opened the door. "Go in." Rachel hesitated before stepping into the luxurious interior. Sitting across from her was David, leaning back in the plush leather seat, his demeanor as composed as ever. "Hi, David," Rachel said, forcing a smile. "It's been a while." David raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "Rachel Woods, you look well. As well as can be expected." Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. David chuckled. A little birdie told me that Dietrich Porte has bitten off more than he can chew. That's an understatement. Rachel said, her gaze unflinching. Look, David, I need information. I can't let them take him down. He's my oldest and dearest friend. David leaned forward, his expression unreadable. And what of the fraud? The conspiracy? Would you save him from that too? Rachel narrowed her eyes. Is this the pot calling the kettle black? David's smile faded. I thought you needed help, not to start with insults. She sighed, softening her tone. You're right. I'm sorry. Look, the way I see it, it's just money. He can make it back. David tilted his head, studying her. You've always been overconfident, Rachel, and you've always been predictable, she shot back. He laughed softly, the sound devoid of humor. Touché. But tell me, who will give him money to invest after this? We'll figure something out. Rachel said, right now, I need ammunition against James Price, Senator. Price is pulling every string to protect his son. Dietrich's the only one being charged, and we both know why. David's gaze hardened. Leave it with me. By tomorrow. Rachel pressed, her voice.
The meeting ends. Rachel opened the door, stepping out into the night. She turned to see Jesse approaching, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Who's that? David asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. My friend Jesse. Rachel replied quietly. David nodded. All right, I'll be in touch. Rachel watched as the G-Wagon disappeared into the darkness, its tail lights glowing like embers. She turned to Jesse, who had reached the bar's entrance. Everything okay? Jesse asked, her sharp eyes scanning Rachel's face. Rachel nodded, though her mind churned with uncertainty. Let's go inside. Inside the dimly lit bar, Rachel couldn't shake the unease settling in her gut. David was a wild card, unpredictable at best, dangerous at worst. She knew trusting him was a gamble, but with the FBI circling and James Price's network tightening its grip, she had no choice. Jesse leaned over the table, her voice low. What's our next move? Rachel took a deep breath. We need to get access to the crypto keys. We should be able to recoup some of the funds. Jesse nodded. And what about David? Can you trust him? Rachel's gaze hardened. No, but I can use him. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, in a shadowy government office, Senator Price sat with his chief of staff. The senator's fingers drummed against the mahogany desk as he read the latest reports. James says Rachel's digging into the entities. The staffer said cautiously, let her dig. Price said, his voice icy. She'll find nothing but dirt, and when she's buried under it, we'll make our move. Back in her hotel room, Rachel sat with Jess, her tech-savvy ally. They pored over encrypted files. David had provided their contents, slowly revealing a tangled web of financial deceit. Look at this, Jesse said, pointing to a ledger entry. It's a payout to a consultancy. The name matches a shell company tied to the Prices. Rachel's stomach turned. It's a money trail if we can link it to James. We have him. Jesse nodded. I'll dig deeper. Rachel felt the weight of the room pressing down on her as she sat across from James Price. His once confident demeanor was now reduced to sweat-soaked desperation. The faint hum of a laptop filled the air, a constant reminder of the evidence being extracted by the Jesse. Rachel's sharp gaze never left James, her presence as suffocating as the silence between his stammered answers. Unmasking. Deception. James shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his drenched shirt clinging to his back. Rachel leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, her tone razor sharp. "James, we're past the point of games. Where's the money?" He hesitated, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Finally, he exhaled. "I only have access to $1 billion in liquid funds now. The rest, it's tied up in other assets." Rachel's expression didn't soften. Instead, her jaw tightened and her eyes narrowed. "Tied up," she echoed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've leveraged yourself into oblivion, haven't you?" James's eyes darted toward the corner where the woman continued typing with practiced efficiency. He licked his lips nervously. "Rachel, it's not that simple." "It is that simple," she snapped, cutting him off. "You've dragged my name, my investments, and my family through the mud. You don't get to plead complexity now." A calculated move. Rachel stood abruptly, pacing the room like a predator circling its prey. She stopped near the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water and placing it on the table. Her voice softened, but the edge remained. "James, you're in over your head. You've lied, stolen, and gambled your way into a corner. But here's the thing, you don't get to drag me down with you." He looked up at her, his face pale. I can get more. We just need time." "Time?" Rachel chuckled darkly. "James, you've had time. You've had resources, connections, and every advantage money can buy. And yet, here we are." She took a slow sip of water, her eyes boring into his now, hand over the phone and the drive. James hesitated, his hand moving instinctively toward his ankle. Slowly, he produced a phone and a small drive, placing them on the table. Rachel picked them up and passed them to the woman in the corner. The woman nodded, her fingers flying over the keys. Rachel felt the weight of the room pressing down on her as she... Rachel returned to her seat, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "James, this is your chance. Copper it fully, and maybe, just maybe, you'll walk away with something left." James swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" Rachel leaned in, her face inches from his. "Then I'll make sure every skeleton in your closet sees the light of day. Your father's influence won't protect you from that kind of exposure." For the first time, true fear flickered in James's eyes. He glanced at the woman in the corner, who was now speaking softly in Farsi. Rachel nodded at her, murmuring, "Mercy," before turning her attention back to James. "You've been helpful," she said, standing up. "For now." She walked toward the door, pausing to look over her shoulder. "But if I find out you've held anything back, I'll be back. And next time, I won't be so kind." The aftermath. As the door clicked shut, James slumped in his chair, the weight of the encounter pressing heavily on him. His mind raced, replaying Rachel's words and the grim reality of his situation. He had underestimated her, and now he was caught in a web of his own making. In the hallway, Rachel and the woman walked briskly toward the elevator. Rachel's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. "Neil, the trade is done?" Rachel typed back quickly, "Thanks, close out tomorrow." As they stepped into the elevator, Rachel allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She wasn't done with James Price, not by a long shot. But tonight, she had taken back some of the power he had tried to steal. For the first time in weeks,
She felt a glimmer of hope, but she knew better than to rest easy. The game was still far from over. The walls of Rachel's office were papered with diagrams, trade logs, and financial reports. At the center of it all was a name circled in bold red ink. James Price, the evidence retrieved from James's drive, painstakingly decrypted by Noah and his tech-savvy team, had revealed a web of fraudulent trades and market manipulation so extensive it defied belief. A market in turmoil. Rachel paced her office, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as she listened to the latest financial news. The fallout had begun. James Price's investment into Wong's failing crypto project, designed to bolster the value of the so-called stable coin, had instead become a catalyst for its collapse. The market was in free fall, the once hyped cryptocurrency now dragging other tokens and projects into the abyss. Breaking news, the reporter on the television said. The cryptocurrency market is experiencing unprecedented losses as allegations of fraud against high-profile investor James Price surfaced. The stablecoin, once valued at $60 billion, is now worth a fraction of its former value. Rachel turned off the television and leaned against her desk, her expression grim but resolute. "Noah," she said, her voice sharp, "how much longer until the media gets hold of the second wave of documents?" Noah, seated at his laptop in the corner, didn't look up as he replied, "They're scheduled for release in 2 hours. The narrative will shift from the collapse of the stablecoin to James' direct involvement in orchestrating the fraud. By the end of the day, the world will know exactly who he is." Rachel nodded, satisfaction flickering briefly across her face. The short. Rachel's old friend and business partner Neil had worked quickly to position Rachel's collateral to benefit from the bad news. Using the assets Rachel had secured from James's collateral, Neil was able to position himself to short the cryptocurrency market so that Rachel and Dietrich could make back some of the money that they had lost. It was a risky move, but one Rachel had deemed necessary. In a secure video call from his office in Zurich, Neil's face appeared on Rachel's screen. "The shorts are performing better than expected," he said, a hint of excitement in his typically stoic tone. "We're up 50% already, and it's climbing. The market is in full panic mode." Rachel allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Keep me updated. Once we hit the target, pull out and move everything to the Switzerland account." "Understood," Neil replied before the call ended. Media frenzy. As promised, the second wave of evidence was released to the media, detailed records of fraudulent trades. Manipulated algorithms and insider deals flooded the airwaves. Headlines screamed accusations against James Price. High-stakes fraud, James Price exposed in crypto collapse. Senator's son at center of 60 Babylonian crypto scandal. Fraud, manipulation, and greed. The fall of James Price. Reporters camped outside Rachel's office, their cameras flashing as they shouted questions. The public's ire shifted from the faceless collapse of the crypto market to the man at its center. James Price became the symbol of everything wrong with high-stakes investing. One and the global fallout. The arrest of one, the creator of the doomed stablecoin, added another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. Detained in Montenegro for traveling on a fake passport, one now faced extradition requests from both the US and South Korea. His stablecoin's collapse had triggered a $2 trillion wipeout in the global cryptocurrency market, and authorities were eager to hold him accountable. Rachel watched the news coverage with a mix of satisfaction and unease, thankful that David had come through with the information that she could use to trade with the FBI. The spotlight on Juan provided some cover for her own actions, but she knew it wouldn't last. Her name had already been linked to the scandal through Dietrich and James. The reporters outside her office weren't going anywhere. Confrontation looms. As the financial world reeled from the fallout, Rachel prepared for the next phase of her plan. She knew James wouldn't go down without a fight, and his father's political clout would soon come into play. The senator's team had already begun their smear campaign against her, painting her as a ruthless opportunist willing to destroy anyone in her path. But Rachel had anticipated this. She had more evidence, more connections, and now, the financial leverage to fight back. Noah looked up from his laptop, his expression grim. "Rachel, we have another problem." "What now?" she asked, her tone weary but determined. The air in Rachel's office was heavy with tension. Noah stood by the window, staring out at the skyline as reporters buzzed outside, their cameras poised for any movement. Rachel sat at her desk, flipping through stacks of papers, her face impassive. Dietrich paced back and forth, visibly agitated, his finely tailored suit betraying his unraveling composure. The news breaks. Rachel turned the volume back up on the television as the newscaster continued. Breaking news. A class action lawsuit has been filed against X Labs and its affiliates, accusing them of defrauding investors to the tune of $5 billion. The lawsuit alleges that the company used celebrities to promote digital products with exaggerated claims, misleading investors into believing in their inflated value. The camera cut to Mark and Matthew, two plaintiffs, in the case. Seated in the studio, their voices carried a mix of anger and entitlement. "Mark, we trusted them. They presented X Labs as a revolutionary investment opportunity. They used celebrities to reel us in, and we bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Now we've lost everything. We just want justice." Rachel muted the TV and looked over at Noah, her expression unreadable. "Noah," she began, "how bad is this?" "Very bad," Noah replied. "Senator Price is bankrolling the plaintiff's legal team, and it's not just about the money. They're weaponizing this lawsuit to destroy your reputation and Dietrich's credibility." Strategizing. The team convened in the conference room where Kip Samuels, their lead attorney, laid out the details of the lawsuit. "The plaintiffs are claiming fraud on multiple levels," Kip explained, his tone measured. "They're arguing that X Labs and its affiliates knowingly misled investors by using celebrity endorsements and inflated projections. They're asking for $5 billion in damages, but we know that's a scare tactic. The actual capital investment was significantly lower." Rachel leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin. "We know this is a political hit job. James Price and his father are orchestrating this. But what's their endgame?" Kip adjusted his glasses. "Control. They want to drag this out to drain your resources and tarnish your reputation. If X Lab files for bankruptcy, it'll be seen as an admission of guilt, and the Prices will walk away unscathed."
The same firm is handling a separate case for one of Senator Price's POCs. It's no coincidence. Kip raised an eyebrow. If we can link the senator's funding directly to the plaintiff's attorneys, it could undermine the credibility of their case. Rachel nodded. Good work, Noah, keep digging. If we can expose this, we can shift the narrative in our favor. A calculated response. Rachel and Dietrich drafted a public statement to address the lawsuit. They chose their words carefully, aiming to project confidence without dismissing the plaintiff's grievance entirely. Rachel read the final draft aloud. In our view, these claims are opportunistic, and Positive X Labs has always operated with transparency and integrity. And we are confident that the evidence will prove as much. While we sympathize with those who have experienced losses, we will vigorously defend ourselves against these unfounded accusations. Dietrich nodded. It's strong, but we need more than words. We need action. The media frenzy. The next morning, the lawsuit dominated the headlines. Reporters camped outside Rachel's office, their questions growing more pointed with each passing hour. Miss Woods, did X Labs defraud its investors? Mr. Porte, what role did you play in the alleged scheme? Noah watched from the window, his expression grim. They're not going to stop until they have their pound of flesh. The plan. Behind closed doors, the team worked tirelessly to formulate their strategy. Kip outlined the legal defenses, while Noah continued to trace the senator's financial ties to the plaintiff's attorneys. Dietrich reached out to his network, seeking allies who might vouch for X Lab's integrity. As the day ended, Rachel stood in her office, staring out at the city lights. Dietrich joined her, his shoulders slumped but his resolve unbroken. Rachel, he said softly, I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess. I never meant for things to get this bad. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. We're in this together, Dietrich, and we're gonna fight like hell to come out on top. In the conference room, Kip and Noah continued to pore over documents, their determination evident. The team was united, their focus clear. They knew the road ahead would be treacherous, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. The Devil's Gambit was far from over, and Rachel Woods was just getting started.
I wanted to show me on Treppy, and my language little bomber of Petrix. I wanted the five as slowing smite first. I would have seen the show me on Treppy. I wanted all's question every since between. Why snorings might first let you know to stay that I stay. Why wanted all has question of fire between. I will excite question of Bane to stay in the field. I will the thinking posted the fight to the daring swins. I will the traveling post-bore. I wanted to watch the far as a board of money. The far as you the friends to get without loving close bull. I wanted all as still a play ward. I want the kill rum packet. I want to still have no smile friends. If a fighting stop rocky round a whole bets.
The weight of the last 2 months hung in the room like a fog as Rachel sat at her desk, papers and spreadsheets strewn across the surface. The lawsuit had consumed every waking moment, and the constant media scrutiny had become a relentless drumbeat in her life. Dietrich stood by the window, staring out at the bustling city below. His expression contemplative. Rachel looked up, her voice heavy with sarcasm. Dietrich, we need to hire a PR team to handle this. It's been 2 months, and the news just won't let go. Dietrich turned, a faint smirk on his lips. You know what they say? Any publicity is good publicity. Rachel shot him a sharp look. Whoever said that clearly didn't have a wife named Elise breathing down their neck about every single headline. Dietrich chuckled. You should go on vacation. Maldives is terrific this time of year. Vacation? Rachel said incredulously, her eyes narrowing. I would love to be able to sleep for 5 uninterrupted hours. A vacation sounds like a dream. She shook her head and sighed. We have to settle this. If it keeps up, my mother will become a permanent fixture at my house. Dietrich nodded, his expression serious now. Okay, let's work on a settlement offer and get this over with. I'll call the PR team and have them prepare a statement for the press. Elizabeth steps in. Later that evening, Rachel paced her living room, phone in hand. Elizabeth, can you do me a favor? Depends, Elizabeth replied. What's the ask? I need you to go to Europe for a month. Rachel said, create a distraction.
Go to every newsworthy event, take pictures, and post them on social media. Elizabeth sighed. Rachel, if you weren't my favorite sibling, I wouldn't even consider this. Clark and I are just getting serious. How am I supposed to date him when I'm gallivanting across the continent? Rachel's tone softened. It's hardly a hardship, is it? Paris, Berlin, London, all 5-star luxury resorts. Elizabeth murmured, fine, but you owe me. Negotiations heat up. Noah had been tracking the market for months, waiting for the perfect moment. The prices of the disputed digital assets had fallen so low they were practically begging to be bought. Kip barged into Rachel's office, his face red with frustration. Noah, have you been tampering with the lawsuit? Noah blinked, feigning innocence. Kip, I have no idea what you're talking about. Kip slammed his fist on Rachel's desk. Don't lie to me. I know you've been trying to influence the outcome. Noah stayed calm, his voice even listened. Kip, the lawsuit has served its purpose. It's pushed asset values down to rock bottom. Now's the time to buy them back selectively.
Rachel nodded in agreement. It's a good strategy, let's do it. Kip sighed, his frustration ebbing. Fine, but make sure it's untraceable. I don't want any blowback. The team gathered in the conference room, Kip leading the discussion. We need to make an offer. Their legal fees are skyrocketing, and they'll be motivated to settle. Rachel leaned forward. What's the number? Noah chimed in, 20 cents on the dollar. It's low, but it's a starting point. Rachel frowned. That seems too low. We need to show we're serious. After some deliberation, Kip proposed a compromise. Let's add a public gesture, a 50,000 literacy program in the plaintiff's name. It'll give them credit for standing up for investors. Rachel nodded. Do. And make it clear, this is our final offer. As Noah walked into the conference room with Rachel's notes, he heard John, the lawyer, replied, Kip, this is not even an offer. Noah interjected, just look at the price of the assets. If they can sell them, they should. What we are offering is far more compelling than the market. He paused and looked across at Kip. Kip said, John, it's a good offer and the only one you are going to get. John said, Kip, it does not even cover fees. How can I accept this for my clients? Rachel and Dietrich misled investors. Noah pushed the audited report across to John. It's all there. Take it, Slabs lost. 1.5B, which is the capital invested by Rachel and Dietrich. So where is the money that you plan to collect? Where is the unjust gain? Where is it? John replied, Okay, Noah, there's no need to get on your soapbox. Honestly, guys, it's a weak offer, and I think there's room for improvement. We could adjust the terms to better suit my client's needs. They pause as the door opens, and Rachel walks in. She smiles and sits across from John. Rachel leaned forward and looked directly at John. What are your client's needs, John? She asked. John paused for a moment. He was surprised to be sitting across from her, so he took the time to frame his response. Well, they need to recoup their legal fees for one, he said. And they also want some sort of acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. They want justice. Rachel nodded slowly, taking in his words. We can work with that, she said. Let's see if we can come up with a revised offer that meets both our needs. Rachel tapped her fingers and pulled up Noah's report. John, she said, how about we put up 250,000 literacy program in their name? That way, they get credit for standing up for investors and helping to shape the industry, she said. Kip chimed in. That's a great idea. Rachel, John, what do you think?
John stood up and said, I'll call you by the end of the day, Kip. Noah added, John, why don't you use my office to call your client? And then if it's agreeable, we can all go for lunch at the new steakhouse, the one at the park. John replied, sure, give me a few minutes. Kip signaled to Rachel. Rachel said, "John, please let Noah know if you need anything. Unfortunately, I have a meeting downtown and cannot attend the lunch." John thanked her. "Thank you, Rachel." Rachel stood at the window staring down at the bustle of traffic below when her phone pinged. Tiredly, she moved back to her desk to look down at it. It was Noah. "We have a deal," he said. Rachel smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. The hard work had paid off. A toast to victory. Later that evening, Dietrich walked into Rachel's office with a bottle of champagne. Noah followed, holding the signed settlement papers. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" Dietrich grinned. "To a great team, we did it." Noah handed her a glass as Dietrich poured the champagne. "Elizabeth deserves some credit too," Rachel said with a smile. Her distraction worked wonders. Dietrich chuckled. "I'll be sure to thank her personally." As they clinked glasses, Noah turned on the TV. The newscaster's voice filled the room. "The settlement between X Labs and its investors has been finalized. Details remain confidential, but both sides have expressed satisfaction with the outcome." Rachel leaned back in her chair, a rare smile gracing her lips. "It's finally over." Dietrich looked out the window, his own relief evident. "And now?" Rachel stretched and stood up. "Now, I'm going home early." Dietrich laughed. "The sun hasn't even set yet." Rachel grinned. "Exactly. Time to enjoy the calm while it lasts." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the team shared a quiet moment of triumph, but in the back of their minds, they all knew this was just one battle. The war was far from over. All this from Altenex would shake him here. "She's so high rubble, and you have all those sangbischenuk showed a bawling stops. We shay too such ulfeinbactive common Soviets twanian a real personate. We sung gapt for Campbellden and enskinsefer poppet and entubbelt a basfi and leechen she torgen. I'm herboiken and torgen as not bowing the saunter for runshit from onchristening ein unfuriero. Over with voel to shade and farren splik out of tone. Before like fill this brass at patient, will the drening the holders sing the four to raps in the restaurant, we elect in severi in scaring until Simons. Fine severely plain series in Kaim Taunus, in hardly Coastern Iwist. Prefections we in between for showing to core. The children's of over a wiven for yum. Known story and tale.
Dietrich sat alone in his townhouse, the blinds half closed, casting slats of light across the sparsely furnished room. His hands trembled slightly as he poured a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the dim light. He had just come back from the federal building, the echo of the agents' voices still rattling in his mind. "You're free to go, Mr. Porte," one of them had said, "but don't leave town. We may need you for further questioning." Dietrich was free, but he didn't feel free. The investigation had cleared him of criminal wrongdoing, but it had left scars, ones that wouldn't fade. His reputation was tattered, his fortune decimated, and his confidence shaking to the core. He stared at the glass in his hand, wondering how he'd let it all come to this. Across town, Rachel sat in her father Jonathan's study, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jonathan paced the room, his frustration palpable. "Rachel," he began, his voice heavy, "I've watched you pour your heart and soul into this, but it's gone too far. The prices are a cancer, and Dietrich, he's dragging you down with him." Rachel looked up at her father, her expression unwavering. "Dad, I'm Sasha's godmother. Allison was my college roommate. Dietrich is my best friend." Jonathan stopped pacing and turned to face her. His voice softened, but his words were no less firm. "I understand your loyalty, Rachel, but you have Elise to think about. Look at what this has done to her. The stress, the headlines, the donors pulling out of her lab. You can't save everyone, and you certainly can't save him.
at the expense of your family. Rachel glanced at Elise, who sat quietly by the window, her face drawn from weeks of strain. Elise caught Rachel's gaze and gave her a small, understanding nod. "It's just too much, Rachel," Jonathan continued. "The money is one thing, but getting tangled up with morally corrupt politicians like the Prices? That's a whole different level of risk." Rachel inhaled deeply, steeling herself. "I can't abandon him, Dad. He's not just my friend, he's family. And family doesn't walk away when things get hard." Jonathan shook his head, a mixture of admiration and exasperation on his face. "You've always had a strong sense of loyalty, but don't let it be your undoing." Noah's revelation. Later that evening, Rachel met Noah in her office. He walked in, his laptop under one arm and a stack of documents in his hand. His expression was grim. "Noah," Rachel said, "please tell me you have good news." Noah set the documents on her desk and opened his laptop. "Depends on how you define good," he replied.
I've been digging into Senator Price's finances, and what I've found is disturbing. Rachel leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Go on." Noah clicked a few keys, pulling up a series of spreadsheets and wire transfer records. "There's a massive money laundering operation tied to his political campaign, offshore accounts, shell companies, donations funneled through PALCs. It's all here." Rachel stared at the screen, the enormity of the revelation sinking in. "How much money are we talking about?" "Billions," Noah said quietly. "And it's not just campaign funds. Some of it traces back to the crypto investments and even to James Price's ventures. The entire operation is a house of cards, and if we push hard enough, it'll collapse." Rachel sat back, her mind racing. "This could be the leverage we need to take them down." Noah nodded. "But it's dangerous. If we go after Senator Price, we're not just dealing with a financial scandal. We're dealing with power, influence, and people who will do whatever it takes to protect their interests. A broken bond." The next day, Rachel visited Dietrich. His townhouse felt as empty as he did, the echoes of his former life haunting every corner. He sat at the kitchen counter, nursing his bourbon. "You're free," Rachel said, trying to sound optimistic. "That's something." Dietrich looked at her, his eyes hollow. "Is it? I've lost everything that mattered. My name, my fortune, my dignity. What's left? You still have Sasha," Rachel said gently, "and you still have me." Dietrich let out a bitter laugh. "You shouldn't. Look at what I've done to you. Your father's right. You should walk away." Rachel reached across the counter and took his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Dietrich, the next move. Back in her office, Rachel met with Noah to plan their next steps. The documents he had uncovered were a ticking time bomb, and they needed to decide how to use them. "We go public," Rachel said firmly. "Expose the Prices for what they are." Noah hesitated. "That's a dangerous game, Rachel. Once we do this, there's no going back." "I know," Rachel replied, her jaw set. "But it's the only way to end this." Noah nodded, his expression grim. "Then let's do it," Rachel said as she picked up the phone to call Agent Lee.
Rachel sat across from Agent Lee in a secure conference room at the FBI field office. The walls were sterile and cold, the fluorescent lights casting a clinical glow over the stacks of documents. Noah had compiled, her hands trembled slightly as she slid the folder across the table. "This," Rachel said, forced firm, despite the nerves coursing through her, "is everything we've been able to gather on the Price's offshore accounts, shell companies, POC donations. It's all connected, and it goes deeper than I thought." Agent Lee, A seasoned investigator with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor opened the folder and began leafing through the documents. Each page seemed to tighten the lines on her face. "Chinese operatives?" she asked, glancing up at Rachel with newfound respect. Rachel nodded. Noah traced several transactions to entities linked to Chinese intelligence. "It's not just campaign money, it's influence. They've been using the prices to manipulate domestic policies in their favor." Agent Lee leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed. "This is explosive. If it's true, it could bring down a senator and possibly destabilize broader political alliances." "It's true," Rachel said, "but we need proof. Undeniable, irrefutable proof." The captive operative. Hours later, Agent Lee stood in an interrogation room, separated from the suspect by a table and the weight of her reputation. The operative, a middle-aged man with sharp features and a carefully neutral expression, sat with his hands cuffed in front of him. His posture was relaxed, but Lee could see the tension simmering beneath the surface. "You've had quite the busy career," Lee began, her tone conversational. She slid a photo across the table, a grainy image of the man shaking hands with a known Chinese diplomat. "Care to explain this?" The operative remained silent, his gaze fixed on the photo. "Let's not waste each other's time." Lee continued, leaning forward. "We know about the transfers, the offshore accounts, the Price family's involvement. What we don't know yet is the endgame. Help me understand, and maybe we can work something out." The man smirked, but said nothing. Lee sighed and pulled out a second photo, this one showing the operative meeting with Senator Price at a private fundraiser. "You're not just some middleman. You're a key player in this operation. If you think we're gonna let you walk out of here without talking, you're mistaken." The operative's smirk faltered. "You have nothing on me," he said finally, his voice measured. "Just speculation and photographs." Lee opened a laptop and played a recording.
The room filled with the sound of a familiar voice, James Price, discussing favorable arrangements and mutual benefits with a Chinese financier. The operative's composure cracked. "Your boss's son has a big mouth," Lee said, closing the laptop. "This recording ties you directly to the Price's schemes. Now, I'll ask you again, what's the endgame?" The man's eyes darted to the camera in the corner of the room. He licked his lips nervously, then leaned forward. "The endgame is influence," he said quietly. "The Prices promised access, policy changes, lucrative contracts, favorable trade terms. In exchange, they secured campaign funds and personal kickbacks. And the Chinese?" Lee pressed. "They wanted to control the narrative," the operative admitted. "Through the Prices, they could manipulate U.S. trade policies and public opinion. It's not just about money, it's about power." Lee sat back, processing the information and the money laundering operation. The man hesitated, then nodded. The funds were funneled through a series of shell companies. Some went to the Price's campaign. Some went to cover their personal debts. The rest was reinvested to keep the cycle going. Lee stood and walked to the door. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said. "We'll be in touch." Later that evening, Rachel sat in her office, staring at the city lights. Noah entered, holding a fresh stack of documents. "Lee just called," he said. "They're moving forward with the case. They think they can bring charges against both Senator Price and James." Rachel nodded, her mind racing. "It's not over yet," she said. "The Prices won't go down without a fight." Noah set the documents on her desk and leaned against the edge. "We've done everything we can. It's up to the feds now." Rachel looked at him, her expression determined. "I won't stop until they're held accountable. They've hurt too many people, and it's time they face the consequences." As the two of them sat in silence, the weight of the fight ahead hung heavy in the air. But for the first time, Rachel felt a glimmer of hope. The Price's empire was beginning to crumble, and she was ready to see it fall. "En je ment hem zout Arlendes, Noah et stai, Tamin your Kurwitz of great, Aen, kill na matter. Kill is seen some bird, I'm breaking, birder." Clardat en spatte sees Klein Sullens, thinking in Udderstein a song waiting, and pacing emmons, the bite please. I'm right euro pint up every day. A shaos of heltly too much, passillate the sile, wizen. This is it within. The never adrit and you, was and self the merrier, fragen keep, against it the feature, perceive the scene is, stat pulsant above excited, and so Simons commemorate the stories of snowing and dawns,
and a dream lies behind that Cecil Pat's face, prison seams, somewhere it sees designed. The mains obscene, and seems all snow and hat this the refitting death that is at spash that light be created in a meal. You're just imperatively got this main, and the cations of his backward in us mowing. The seams singling self, or to see matter is just precision. If Slater had to go forwards, and never you try.
Van Hatrix took over, stepping forward with a stack of documents. This is not just about financial losses or corporate misconduct. This is about the misuse of power, political influence, and a web of lies spun by one family for their gain. He clicked a remote, and the screen behind them displayed a flowchart linking the prices to offshore accounts, shell companies, and foreign operatives. The room erupted in murmurs, reporters feverishly typing on their laptops. Rachel continued, "We have evidence tying Senator Price's political campaign to money laundering operations and foreign interference. These funds were funneled through shell companies and used to manipulate policy decisions, benefiting both the Prices and their affiliates." One reporter raised his hand. "Are you saying the senator knowingly collaborated with foreign intelligence?" Dietrich nodded. "Yes, the evidence speaks for itself. We've shared all of this with federal authorities, and an investigation is underway." The screens shifted to a recorded video. It showed James Price in a dimly lit room, speaking candidly about strategic partnerships and leveraging political capital. The damning words were clear. "With the right people in our corner, we can shape the narrative and control the game." The crowd gasped. Cameras clicked furiously. Rachel leaned into the microphone, her gaze piercing. "This is not just about accountability. This is about ensuring that those who abuse power are held to the same standards as everyone else." The assassination plot. As the press conference footage played on every major network, the Prices scrambled to contain the fallout in his opulent penthouse. James Price paced, his face contorted with anger. His father, Senator Price, stood by the window, phone in hand, barking orders to aides. James slammed his fist on the desk. "She's ruining everything. We have to stop her." The senator turned, his expression cold.
The Java drinker beat, or talks, happer, my damned tone.
She sings strict, she twee, one with head hotels, CD inside her. From West 5, she had grove, she dronks. She came pretty from Lee. Sevim, Sevleen, Sevrit, and the smugness. One when else wail on skyle. It's not in how the guns and teeps out of eye. She expressed tearing, wrist from Lee's biting powders. She cold dressed some. "And how do you propose we do that?" James' jaw tightened permanently. The senator's face darkened, but he said nothing. James picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's time. Make sure it looks like an accident." Jessie sat in her apartment, scrolling through encrypted messages on her laptop. One caught her attention. A vague but chilling directive. "Target. Woods, ensure no loose ends." Her heart raced as she traced the message's origin. It led back to a burner phone linked to one of James Price's associates. She grabbed her phone and called Rachel immediately. "You're in danger," she said, her voice urgent. "I just intercepted a message about an attempt on your life." Rachel froze. "What are you talking about?" "There's no time to explain. I'm forwarding this to Agent Lee. Stay where you are and don't trust anyone." "Elise, Jessie, go to Elise," she said, frantic. FBI intervention. Agent Lee's team acted swiftly, intercepting the would-be assassin just blocks from Rachel's townhouse. The suspect, a hired operative with ties to James Price, was arrested with incriminating evidence: blueprints of Rachel's home, a dossier on her movements, and a weapon,
Rachel watched the news from the safety of a secure location. Jessie sat beside her, her laptop open to the FBI's live updates. "They've got him," Jessie said, exhaling in relief, "and the evidence ties back to James." Rachel nodded, her expression grim. "This is far from over." Public and political fallout. The next morning, headlines blazed across every major outlet. Assassination plot foiled, ties to Senator Price's family uncovered. Public outrage reached a fever pitch. Protests erupted outside the Price's residences and offices. Political allies distanced themselves, and calls for Senator Price's resignation flooded social media in her secure location. Rachel prepared for her next move. She looked at Dietrich and Jessie, determination in her eyes. "They wanted to silence me now. I'll make sure the entire world hears the truth." Dietrich raised his glass to justice. Jessie smirked, and to making sure the Prices never see another day in power. As they clinked glasses, the battle against corruption reached its boiling point. Rachel knew the fight wasn't over, but she also knew one thing: she wouldn't back down.
Midnight arrest. The black SUVs rolled silently through the quiet suburban streets, their headlights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. FBI agents clad in tactical gear surrounded the target property, a luxury townhouse on the Upper East Side. Inside, the lead hired assassin, a man with a criminal record spanning continents, was unaware of the noose tightening around him. In a matter of minutes, the agents breached the doors, their movements swift and precise. The suspect, startled awake, barely had time to reach for the weapon hidden under his mattress before he was tackled to the ground. "FBI," an agent barked, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and other federal charges." The man glared but said nothing, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. The room was quickly searched, yielding damning evidence: burner phones, encrypted messages, and payments directly linked to Senator Price accounts. The raid. Hours later, as dawn broke over Washington, D.C., the FBI launched coordinated raids on multiple properties owned by the Price family. The senator's estate, a sprawling mansion in Virginia, was swarmed by agents armed with search warrants inside. Staff members scurried to comply as rooms were meticulously searched for incriminating documents. At the same time, federal agents stormed James Price's Manhattan penthouse. The scene quickly turned chaotic as James, realizing the gravity of the situation, bolted for the service elevator. "James Price, stop," an agent shouted, but he didn't pause. He sprinted through the underground parking garage, weaving between cars, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The chase ended abruptly when a black-clad agent tackled him to the ground, pinning him as he struggled. "You can't do this," James screamed, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," the agent replied coldly, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists.
Clips of the senator looking haggard and disheveled,
stepping out of his home under heavy escort flooded the screens. He refused to answer shouted questions from reporters. In her safe house, Rachel sat watching the coverage, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. Dietrich was beside her, his hands clasped tightly as if to contain his own emotions. Jessie burst into the room, phone in hand. "They've got him," she said, grinning. "James is in custody, and they're freezing the senator's accounts." Rachel let out a slow breath, a faint smile breaking through. "It's finally happening," she murmured. "The truth is out." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for the Price's Senator. Price faced calls for his resignation from both sides of the aisle, his political allies scattering like rats from a sinking ship. Public trust in the family, once seen as untouchable elites, was shattered. The FBI confirmed that their investigation had uncovered a vast network of money laundering and illicit dealings implicating not just the senator, but also several of his key associates. A federal indictment was announced, charging him with conspiracy, corruption, and obstruction of justice. In a stark interrogation room, James sat across from Agent Lee, his hands cuffed to the table. His once impeccable suit was rumpled, and his face bore the marks of a man whose world had crumbled. "James," Agent Lee began, her tone calm but firm, "we have enough evidence to bury you and your father. The question is, how deep do you want this hole to go?" James's eyes darted around the room, his bravado fading. "I didn't want it to go this far," he muttered. "It was supposed to be simple. Simple." Lee leaned forward. "Ordering a hit on Rachel Woods is anything but simple. And we have the payments, the messages, everything." James swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temple. "I'll talk," he said finally, "but I want a deal." A new chapter. As the Price's empire crumbled, Rachel stood at the edge of a new chapter in her life. The battle had been long and grueling, but justice was within reach. Watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to Dietrich and Jessie. "We're not done yet," she said. "There's still more to uncover, more people to hold accountable." Dietrich raised a glass, his voice steady. "To the truth, and to never backing down." Rachel clinked her glass against his, a glint of determination in her eyes. "To the truth." The afternoon sun filtered through the high windows of Rachel's office, casting long streaks of light across the room. The space, usually buzzing with energy, was unusually quiet. Rachel sat behind her desk, her eyes scanning a document, though her thoughts were miles away. The soft knock at the door broke her concentration. "Come in," she called, her voice calm but slightly wary. The door creaked open, and Dietrich stepped inside. He looked different, thinner, his sharp suit slightly looser on his frame. His once confident demeanor was replaced with a more subdued air, a heaviness in his step. Rachel rose from her chair, unsure whether to extend a hand, offer a hug, or remain distant. She opted for the middle ground, a polite nod. "Dietrich," she said, her tone neutral. "Rachel," he replied, his voice carrying a weight that matched his expression. The conversation. Dietrich walked to the large floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the bustling city below. He let out a long sigh before turning to face Rachel. "I wanted to thank you," he began, "for standing by me when no one else would. I know it wasn't easy." Rachel folded her arms, leaning against the edge of her desk. "It wasn't," she admitted, "but you deserve the truth to come out. That doesn't mean I've forgotten everything that happened." Dietrich nodded, his eyes falling to the floor. "I didn't come here expecting forgiveness, I just needed closure." Rachel arched an eyebrow, her voice soft but edged. "Closure? Do you really think that's possible after everything we've been through?" Dietrich took a step closer, his hands in his pockets. I don't know, but I had to try. The acquittal, it's a relief, sure, but it doesn't erase the damage. It doesn't rebuild the bridges I burned. Bridges, Rachel said, her voice rising slightly. Dietrich, this wasn't just about bridges. This was about trust, about our lives being turned upside down because of your decisions and the people you let into your orbit. The tension. Dietrich flinched at her words, but he didn't counter them. Instead, he nodded, a bitter smile on his lips. You're right. I let greed blind me. I let James Price manipulate me. And I dragged you, and so many others, into the fallout. Rachel took a deep breath, her tone softening. I know you didn't mean for it to happen, but intention doesn't erase the consequences. Elise, my father, the lab, everything was on the line because of this. I've lost too. Dietrich said quietly, more than you realize, my reputation, my clients, my confidence, it's all gone. I'm starting over from nothing. Rachel tilted her head, studying him.
For the first time, she saw not the confident financier she had known for years, but a man humbled by his own downfall. She sighed. You're not starting from nothing, Dietrich. You still have Sasha. You still have people who care about you. He nodded, his voice catching slightly. Sasha is the only reason I kept going. For a moment, silence filled the room, the weight of their shared ordeal hanging between them. Then Rachel spoke, her voice measured. I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were. But I don't hate you, Dietrich. I just don't know if I can trust you again. Dietrich looked at her, his expression pained but understanding. I don't blame you for that. I wouldn't trust me either. Rachel stepped closer, her posture softening. But we've survived, haven't we? We're still standing. He managed a faint smile, barely, but yes. As they stood there, the tension between them shifted, not entirely gone, but transformed into something more manageable. A shared understanding, born from the fire they had both endured. A bittersweet goodbye. Dietrich extended his hand, his eyes searching hers. I hope someday we can rebuild what we've lost. Rachel hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze steady. Someday, she said, but not today. He nodded, releasing her hand and stepping back. Thank you, Rachel, for everything. As Dietrich turned to leave, Rachel watched him go, a mixture of emotions swirling in her chest. Relief, sadness, and a faint glimmer of hope. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone once more. She turned back to the window, her reflection merging with the city skyline beyond. The world had shifted, and so had she. But in that moment, she realized she wasn't standing in the ruins. She was standing on the edge of something new. For the first time, she saw not the confident financier she had known for years, but a man humbled by his own downfall. She sighed. You're not starting from nothing, Dietrich. You still have Sasha. You still have people who care about you. He nodded, his voice catching slightly. Sasha is the only reason I kept going.
The hum of activity in the office was steady, but purposeful. The space, newly leased in a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, buzzed with the energy of something fresh yet deeply necessary. Rachel Wood sat at the head of the conference table, flipping through the mission statement of the foundation she had spent months conceptualizing. Across from her, her younger sister Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, a bemused expression on her face. You sure about this? Elizabeth asked, holding up a draft of the foundation's charter. The name alone screams you. Rachel smiled faintly. Of course it does. The Woods Foundation for Financial Integrity is personal, Liz. This is as much about accountability as it is about redemption.
Elizabeth raised an eyebrow, skimming the document again. "You know, you're putting me in a spotlight I never asked for." Rachel chuckled softly. "That's the point. You're the face of this, not me. I need someone the public will see as impartial and untouched by all this." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the remnants of the scandal that had dominated their lives. Elizabeth sighed. "And here I thought I was your carefree, globe-trotting younger sister. Now I'm suddenly a crusader for justice. Think of it as your next adventure," Rachel quipped, her tone light but her eyes serious. "You'll be good at this, Liz. The foundation needs your energy, your perspective. People trust you." The Foundation's mission was simple but ambitious: to combat financial corruption and promote transparency in corporate practices. Rachel had poured her resources into ensuring it would start strong, gathering a team of legal experts, economists, and advocates who shared her vision. The Foundation's primary goals included funding investigations into unethical practices, advocating for stronger financial regulations, and educating the public about their rights as investors. Elizabeth's role as the director was crucial. Her charm, intelligence, and natural charisma made her the ideal spokesperson. Someone who could draw attention to the Foundation without the baggage. Rachel carried. The plan was already in motion: high-profile interviews, partnerships with global watchdog organizations, and a public launch event that would signal a bold new era for accountability. Restoration and reflection. As Rachel worked tirelessly behind the scenes, she found herself reflecting on the cost of the scandal. The Foundation was as much about rebuilding her life as it was about righting systemic wrongs. She knew the scars left by the ordeal would never fully fade, but they had taught her resilience and focus. Elise, her wife, had become her grounding force, quietly.
Elise, her wife, had become her grounding force, quietly supportive despite the toll the ordeal had taken on their relationship. Rachel often found herself pausing to appreciate the small moments. Coffee together in the mornings, shared laughter over old movies, and the warmth of Elise's hand in hers during the toughest days. Her relationship with Dietrich remained strained but civil. They had both come to understand that their friendship would never return to what it once was, but there was mutual respect for what they had endured together. Dietrich, for his part, was carving out a new path for himself, though he kept his distance from Rachel's work. A step forward. The launch event for the Foundation was held in a grand ballroom in Midtown, attended by influential figures from the financial world, advocates, and members of the media. Elizabeth took to the stage with confidence. Her speech, a blend of inspiration and determination. "We cannot undo the past," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But we can ensure that the future is brighter, more transparent, and fairer for everyone. The Woods Foundation is committed to holding those in power accountable and empowering those who have been wronged." The audience erupted in applause, and Rachel, standing in the wings, felt a swell of pride. She had done it. She had taken the wreckage of her life and turned it into something meaningful. Later that night, Rachel stood on the balcony gazing out at the city lights.
Elise joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You did good today," Elise said softly. Rachel smiled, leaning into her wife. "It's a start," she replied. "There's still so much to do." Elise kissed her temple. "You're rebuilding, Rachel. That's what matters." As they stood there, the weight of the past still lingered, but so did the hope for the future. Rachel knew the scars would remain, but they were a testament to her survival, her growth, and her determination to create a legacy of integrity and justice.